Good evening, everyone, and welcome to those that have joined us before, and also welcome if you are brand new, all equally welcome. My name is Amanda Martin and I am the President of the National Education Union. I'm just going to run through some housekeeping before we get started on tonight's call, and then I'll explain exactly how we're going to be operating this evening. So firstly, as you can see in the chat, it is being recorded, this call, so that we can use it to give to other people that can't make the call, but also so that we can use it to develop our policy and the information that we give out to you. Equally, the chat will be saved, so anything that you put in there will also be saved and be used with regards to any union stuff that is coming out in the future. There is a behaviour code that has been posted, and I please ask you to adhere to the NEU behaviour code that's been posted in the chat throughout your time on this call today. It is in a webinar format, this Zoom meeting, therefore you won't be able to see yourselves and you won't be able to ask questions physically, but we do absolutely want you to get involved, and there are two ways to do that. One is to do exactly what many of you are doing on the chat, which is to say hello, to welcome each other, but also to ask questions and see the links that the tech team put in throughout the conversation. So when any of our panelists this evening mention things, we will be putting that information. Also, if you have any questions about the running of the meeting, or you want to make a comment or a contribution as to whether it's helpful, that would be really good for us to know. We're only doing these if people and members feel that they are worthwhile, so it's good for us to have some feedback around that. The other way we want you to participate is through the Q&A button, the questions and answers button. If you wish to ask a question, go on to that, say your name and where you are from, and put your question. I would advise that you wait until Mary and Kevin have spoken and maybe heard from some of our panelists before you ask some of those questions, because they may well be covered. And just because you get a question in first doesn't mean that it will be answered. Our tech team kind of link those together and make sure that we're trying to cover as many areas as possible in this evening's call. I think that's about it from me, other than to say we have an amazing tech team on site again today. So today we've got Vin, Craig, Sarah, Mark, Mike and Amy, and our signer this evening is Sam Riddle. So welcome to Sam. We will first hear from Kevin and Mary, and then we will hear from a number of NEU reps, because we think as a reps call, it's really good for you to hear what's going on the ground, and maybe some helpful tips for you yourselves. As I've said, welcome. And we're really glad that you could join us this evening. And it goes without saying that we have to absolutely say thank you very much for everything you are doing during this difficult time, and you continue to do, not only in the name of the NEU, but in order to support and protect your colleagues, your pupils, and your communities that you serve. And without further ado, I'll hand over to our Joint General Secretaries, Kevin and Mary. Thank you. Mary, you first, you're unlocked.
No, it's me first, Amanda. So thank you very much, Amanda, for the introductions, and thanks everyone for being on the call. You'll all know about the announcement that Gavin Williamson made yesterday that primary schools are not now going to be expected to open all pupils before the beginning of the summer holidays. Now, in making this announcement, the government really bowed to the inevitable. Everyone else, apart from ministers, it seemed, understood that social cohort, social distancing would not allow all pupils to return unless the number of classrooms was doubled and the number of teachers too. So this is, it's an important step forward for common sense. It's not something we want to call a victory particularly, because we want schools to be open as soon as it's safe to do so. But on the other hand, we are glad that the government has been forced to see sense, that they are now following the science a bit more. And we do think it's a tribute to the work that you've done as members of the union. The Prime Minister was mentioning our union in Prime Minister's Questions Times today. Gavin Williamson mentioning this in Parliament yesterday. It wasn't a complimentary mention, but they were mentions about the fact that we've been raising these important issues. We believe we have always had the highest moral standards. We've been encouraging people to volunteer, to be on the in-school rotas, looking after the children of key workers, and we've been encouraging people to work from home, supporting the education of children, and we've been saying we want to keep our communities, the children's families, our members' families safe. We've been doing everything with the highest moral motives, and so we think It is your achievement. All of you who wrote letters to MPs, all of you who were talking with your heads about early opening and saying, can we go a bit slower? All of you have earned this success yesterday. Last week, the Prime Minister said that all primary schools were due to open to nursery reception year 1 and year 6. But in fact, on that first day, 44% of schools didn't open to any of those school groups. About 21% opened, but only to some of them, and only 35% open to all of them. Even in those schools, many children didn't appear. We want to thank all of you who worked to persuade your heads to delay in order to give more time for the case rate to fall, because that makes it safer for everyone. And also for there to be more time for contact tracing to be properly working. So we think we're doing the right thing. We think by that slowing down, and now by getting the government to abandon all primary kids being in, we have made things safer. And we want to say, even in the schools that opened, our reps have made things safer by getting the checklist in place, by getting social distancing in place, by ensuring vulnerable people can make their contribution working from home. Thank you for everything you did in whatever situation you found yourself in. You have made it safer for all of us.
Thanks, Kevin, and welcome to all you reps on the call. It's wonderful to be here with you, as Kevin has said. It should have been obvious to Boris Johnson and Gavin Williamson that COVID is going to be with us for a long time. Until there is a vaccine, we're going to be having to deal with COVID. And instead of pinning all their hopes, their misplaced hopes on getting all pupils in, all primary pupils in before the summer holidays, they should have been planning, the government should have been planning, as the Scottish government has done, as the Welsh government has done, that in the autumn term and for months after that, perhaps, education is not going to be as we know it. Schools are not going to be able to be run as we have known schools being run before the pandemic. For many months, it may be the case that children are going to have to spend more time at home and less time in school. For many months, there will be maybe restricted numbers of children in school. And so we need a plan. We need a plan for education, not as we have known it, but education done differently. A national plan so that children do not become the hidden casualties of COVID, losing more months of their education, stretching into the autumn term. And that's why tomorrow the NEU is launching its plan for education recovery. It's a 10-point plan, and it's things that the government must do to ensure that children do get an education in this new and challenging time. We want the government to recognise that investment in children's education is as important as its jobs recovery plan. We want the government to recognise that we really have to invest in education in these new times so that our society and our nation has a future.
So we want to just run through the 10 points of that very quickly. Again, we are aiming for the highest moral position in this. Our 10-point plan starts with number 1, that disadvantaged children and young people and their families must be the key priority. They must not become the casualties of COVID. Number 2, we believe that free school meals must continue to be provided over the summer holidays so that disadvantaged children do not go hungry. Holiday hunger was a real phenomenon pre-COVID. It'll be worse in this situation, so we want free school meals across the summer. We think local authorities should be funded to make a summer holiday local offer to children and young people. Local authorities should coordinate the planning of summer holiday clubs, particularly in areas of deprivation, so that children and young people have a safe place to go and positive activities that can engage and interest them and build their confidence for a successful return to school. We think places for those on free school meals should be fully funded by the government. Point 4 is we know we're going to need more space if more children come back in order that we can have social distancing. So we're saying that public buildings such as libraries and sports halls and civic centres, religious buildings where we can get agreement, should be used to expand the space available to schools so that social distancing can be achieved with greater numbers of pupils being educated in school-like settings, if not in the schools themselves. Our 5th point is that qualified teachers who've left the profession should be encouraged to return to teaching. We'll need them in order to have smaller class sizes that allow social distancing. This can help all children to have gone through a traumatic time during the crisis, and in particular disadvantaged children who would benefit greatly from the lower pupil-teacher ratios that could be achieved. These things are expensive, but we think there's a real investment for our country.
So point 6, thank you, Kevin. Point 6 is that qualifications are going to have to change. Children will have been in school, young people have been in school less, so we cannot expect the qualifications to be the same as they were in 2019, and nor can we expect teachers in secondary schools just to have to do what they had to do in a hurry, which was to predict grades and rank orders. So primary school SATs at year 6 should be abandoned. They shouldn't take place because they're a school accountability measure and they won't be comparable to previous years. And GCSE and A-levels are going to have to look very different, much more slimmed down examinations and with more teacher assessment. The government must start making plans for blended learning. That's learning which is in school and at home, and must be making plans for contact with children and remote learning as well. And you know, we need these plans. If there's a second spike or a local increase in the R rate, then children are not going to be able to be in school. They might have breaks from school, so we need plans for blended learning. Children in poverty, point number 8, and low-income households must be given the resources for effective home learning. 700,000 children live in homes where there's no access to the internet. So they need books, they need creative resources, but they also need online learning, they need laptops, and they need free internet connections so that they have the advantages, they have the resources that their more advantaged peers also have. Point number 9. We know that childhood poverty and inequality limits life chances and is a significant factor in the attainment gap that the politicians are so happy to talk about so often. We must not lose a generation because the pandemic makes even more children poor. So we need a can-do mentality around unemployment, around training, and around benefits and direct support to schools as well, particularly those schools who disproportionately educate disadvantaged children. They need more support, they need more help, they need more funding. And finally, our last point is a national plan for children's well-being should be resourced and launched to support children, many of whom will have been through traumas during the lockdown. And students' well-being and children's well-being must be placed at the centre as how we adapt education to meet the needs of children and young people. So those are our 10 points, and our 10-point plan is going to be launched tomorrow. And we'll be presenting the plan in the next few weeks. So do look out for it on our website. You will receive an email with the plan as well. We're writing to the Prime Minister, Boris Johnson, tomorrow, and Gavin Williamson, saying to him, come on, let's adopt this plan and let's get our nation educated and let's really do something to support disadvantaged children. In the meantime, as reps, we want you to focus on continuing to insist on the safest, widest reopening of schools, taking into account local variations. For example, in the R rate, the R rate goes up, you need to delay school opening until it goes down and it's safer to open schools. Where schools have opened, if your school has opened, continue to review safety, continue to have those conversations with whoever in the school management is responsible for safety to keep your school as safe as possible and to raise issues of concern. So the checklist is still important. It's still important to look at the checklist. We've got it on paper and on the app. And when you find that things are happening, things are sliding, things are slipping, issues which should be done are not being done, the checklist is not being adhered to, then re-raise those issues with your school management. Remember that children need to be in smaller groups, enough groups for social cohort distancing to take place. And remember to follow escalation guidance, which is with the checklist when the conditions are not met. And involve your members in everything you do. What we have learned during this COVID crisis is that together in your school, you are strong, whereas individually, you're far less strong. So bring your members in, discuss what you're doing with them, get their support, and move forward together.
Thanks, Mary. I just want to repeat some of our lines about vulnerable staff and vulnerable people. We think of safety in two ways. We want to stop the total amount of community transmission. We've been leading the fight that the government should have contact tracing. If they get it working, that should be able to do some of the work of the restrictions. So we should see the cases falling. But there is still the question of vulnerable staff and vulnerable people. And we want to continue to protect them for as long as there is a significant number of cases around and the chance of catching the disease. So there are 4 or 5 categories to think about. Some of them are, we're getting easier agreement from head teachers. Some of them it's a bit harder. So just to go through them, the extremely clinically vulnerable. These are people who are having cancer treatment, who are recovering from cancer treatment. Really, they shouldn't be in school at any time. And almost every head, nobody's pressing those people to be in work. I hope the extremely clinically vulnerable. That's a list defined by the government on their website. Then there are those who live with the extremely clinically vulnerable. And we don't get much casework of head teachers trying to make those people be in work. They accept that people who live with extremely clinically vulnerable people who can't socially distance from them, that they make their contribution at home. Where we start to get into some more difficulty is the clinically vulnerable. Again, this is a government list. Anybody aged over 70, anybody with moderate asthma, pregnant women, they're all on a list that the government calls clinically vulnerable. And that government list says that those people should refrain from contact with people from outside their household. So we say to all school leaders, if you're refraining from contact with people outside your household, then the easiest way, I mean, you can't do that and be in school. We get some pressure on this, and we have had some casework where we've won it, but where a head teacher has said to a 64-year-old TA with moderate asthma who lives with her husband who's 70, that the TA has to be in school. That's not right. We don't agree with that. And so we do want you to raise that question in your school with your members. And then there's those who live with those clinically vulnerable people. And again, we think it's best at the moment for them to be at home making their contribution. Now, how is that possible? We think there's only about 23% of teachers and TAs from our surveys are in those two categories. So given that most children are still at home, we think it is possible for those people to be at home supporting the children's learning at home. So we think it's achievable for those people to be at home. I said there's 4 categories in there. We think we should go a bit further and think, because the way this COVID-19 impacts very strongly with age, and it also impacts, as we now know, on Black people, we think that people aged over 60, there's only 1% of teachers who are aged over 60. I don't currently have a figure for TAs, but only 1% of teachers are aged over 60. So it shouldn't be a problem for them to stay at home. And then we know that Black people are affected earlier. Mary's going to talk about this in more detail, but we certainly think that Black people aged 55, they should be at home as well, given the way it impacts on them. We think that's achievable. We think it should be a collective question. Those people might have to individually say something to their head, but we want reps to be facilitating conversation and ensuring that we're presenting this collectively.
Yeah, we want to keep people safe. I'll just finish with a short thing about Black staff, because we know that Black staff feel particularly vulnerable because they are disproportionately affected by COVID-19. And we know that age is the most significant risk factor, and it's more risky when compounded with other comorbidities. But the Fenton review shows that Black staff who are like for like, they're the same age, they have the same sort of comorbidities as white people, they're 2 times more likely to die of COVID-19 than white people. And men are affected more than women. So we've produced a fact sheet, coronavirus crisis, what you need to know, racial disparities in COVID-19. And that's a useful information for you if you want to make the argument that a colleague of yours or yourself should not be in school because you are Black and you have other comorbidities, or you're older and you are at much greater risk. We also know that Black staff work in schools which serve deprived communities, and we want this unequal level of risk to be taken into consideration, and we're making representations to government, to the Department for Education, about these issues. So it's important as reps that we see the protection of staff who feel vulnerable, who feel at high risk, as a key element in our concern and our support for our members. There's many pupils at home. As we said in our 10-point plan, they're going to be at home for some time. So there's enough work to go around, whether you're working on the school site or you're working from home.
So just finally then, before we go over to some fantastic reps, we just want to thank all of you for the work that you're doing, for the members, the work you're doing for the members in your school and for the union, as well as for our communities. Without you, there would have been a much more unsafe return to schools. You've achieved a great amount, and we've achieved that together. Together we can confidently go forward, knowing that we can help schools be safer, and then we can educate children and we can build the union to make things better when we're back at school as well. So thank you for everything you're doing.
Thank you very much, Mary and Kevin. And as I noted at the beginning, and as Kevin and Mary have referred to, we have got some fantastic reps today on the call, and there are 4 of them, and I'm going to introduce them one at a time, and they're going to give you a brief resume of what they've been doing in their schools. So first I'm going to start with Zubia. She is a ULT rep, and she's been working on threatening with Section 44 in a hostile environment. So welcome this evening.
Thank you. Hi, I'm Zubia. I work in a school in East London in Redbridge. We are part of the United Learning Trust. And I think because we belonged to that trust, it was very difficult for us to win those concessions, which we did in the end, but it was a struggle. So we first started off with pushing back, saying we're not engaging with the wider reopenings on the 1st of June. So that worked for a period of time until, you know, Boris Johnson came out and said, no, we're definitely opening. And then it led to what we knew was going to happen, was a to and fro between staff and SLT. And it quickly turned hostile when we brought in things that we wanted amended according to the NEU checklist in the risk assessment. So we were told that we didn't trust the school to make it safe for teachers. We were personally attacked in a way. I had a health and safety rep who came on with me, you know, saying that you're quite, you know, you don't appreciate what we've done for you. But what we had to remember as a group, and we're a very strong group in that school, we have 36 members, which is the majority of the school. And it's the strength of that group that actually led us to where we are. Because there were times when I was wobbly as a rep, and I was like, oh, well, do I want to do this? But they were so up for it. And I'll let you know what we wanted from our SLT. We wanted the vulnerable, because this is the part that affected us most. We wanted the clinically vulnerable staff and staff who live with clinically vulnerable people to be safe and allowed to continue working from home. We wanted the amendments in the risk assessment according to the NEU checklist. And we wanted people who were just anxious about going in, whether they be from the BAME community or whether they had to travel on three different modes of public transport to get to school. And we wanted them to feel it was safe and it was okay for them to work from home. We were not given that. And what ended up happening was we had to get our regional officer involved, Glenn Kelly. He was fantastic. He contacted the CEO of our trust, and there was a lot of to and fro, and there were a lot of threats, and it all came down to us saying, well, we're going to exercise our right of Section 44 if we feel that you are telling us to come into a school which is unsafe for us. It did so happen that as this was happening, because we got down right to the wire, I think. So wider reopenings were on Monday, and we were having these conversations over the weekend. And what ended up happening was people who were asking to continue working from home were being told that it's okay, you can. They were getting authorizations and confirmations. So the pressure that the union put on really worked. But I must stress that this was all down to the union group and the union, our union in Redbridge, because they are so strong. And we saw that actually the majority of schools delayed their openings. Our school did not do that. However, we wrote letters and said, well, this is what other people are doing. We should be doing the same because we're in the same borough, regardless of whether or not we belong to an academy trust or not. And in the end, we did get all clinically vulnerable staff, staff who live with clinically vulnerable people, people who travel on public transport, and we did get the risk assessments amended according to the NEU checklist. So that was done. However, it did get quite hostile. I will say on a personal note as well, as reps, sometimes we think that this is about us. And it happens because I went through it, and we think it's about us, and it's not. And then all you need to do is look back at the group that's standing behind you and you representing them. And I think it was the strength of that group that kept going, come on, Zubia, we can do this, we'll stand together. And getting those names down on those letters, it just fills you up with, you feel so empowered by it. And that's how we were able to win these concessions. Everybody worked together as a union, and we knew it wasn't safe, because it wasn't whether or not we trusted our SLT or not. It was about the fact that we're in the middle of a pandemic, and no matter what they did, it was unsafe for us to go back. So yeah, we were able to win those concessions, and very grateful to the union, very, very grateful to the union group that we have at the school. We stand very strong. We actually had a lot of TAs who were not members, who then became members because they felt like they were more supported and their voices were being heard. So at the moment, we're across a school of 4. Obviously United Learning is a huge, they have over 70 schools, but our cluster schools, out of 4 cluster schools, we were told that we're the only school who has this many people continuing to work from home. In the other 3 schools, every member in the school, bar 3, has gone back to school. And I think that was used to kind of embarrass us, and we're not embarrassed by that at all. I think that just shows how strong we are as a group, and we managed to keep our members safe for a little while longer. So that's it.
Zubia, you know what? That you are just an amazing woman and truly inspirational. And I know that the chat, as you were talking, you wouldn't have seen, but the love for you and the work you are doing on behalf of the NEU, but also on behalf of members and your school community is amazing. And so I have to say thank you on behalf of the NEU for your support, because we are a lay-led union, and it's really important that people know that a lay-led union means that we give you the tools to use that power in the way that protects people, and you have done a brilliant job. So I want to say thank you very much. I cry quite a lot, and you just made me cry, so I'm just going to say that. I'm going to bring in the next rep, who is equally amazing and equally having a tough job to start with. And he built a school group and got union concessions and has begun to link with other unions, and that is Lee, and that he is from Astria. Welcome, Lee.
Hey, so I mean, I'll just start quickly by echoing what you said about Zubia and all the other staff in the NEU. So for me, my situation, I became an NEU rep member, or an NEU rep, about 1 month ago, kind of at the height of the crisis, because it was very clear in our school that lots of staff members had very valid concerns, but whereas normally we would be in school in a staff meeting raising these concerns together, it was clear that individual emails were not strong enough. So I became the NEU rep, and I also asked one of my colleagues who is in foundation, so I'm a year 6 teacher, if she would join me and be the health and safety rep, which was really valuable because that meant I had her input and her knowledge of how foundation stage works and how the children will react, sort of thing. So that was really useful when discussing things like risk assessments with senior leadership. I'd also say one thing that's been really valuable as well is sort of picking a couple of members of staff that I know are willing to start discussions, because sometimes on our staff WhatsApp group that we started, it felt a bit like it was just me or my colleague Geeta leading the way, and that's not what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be everyone sharing advice. So sometimes I would just give someone a ring and say, hey, what do you think about this? Are you willing to just start the discussion? And that was really useful as a way of getting more people to raise their voices. So yeah, we started a WhatsApp group, or 2 WhatsApp groups, one specifically for NEU members and then one just for members of staff in the school, excluding SLT members. And I explained to them why that was, and they were understanding of that, because I think regardless of what union anyone was in, everyone has the same concerns right now. And obviously we stress to people the importance of making sure they join the union. So that was really a valuable way to start discussions away from staff email and a bit less formal. So we had multiple meetings with the senior leadership team to discuss the risk assessments, to go through the NEU checklist, to share key documents and talk about the most up-to-date science. And Australia, who have quite a few schools in the area, were planning to open our school on the 1st of June. We then had pretty much all of the teachers and all of the teaching assistants put their name to a letter saying that we would invoke Section 44 and would refuse to come in on the 1st of June, basically, if school began wider opening. And off the back of that, we managed to have school opening put back until at least the 8th, at which point we all had to work very quickly and again write a letter saying, we're glad that you put it back for a week, but the science clearly shows that we should not be considering opening until at least the 15th, and that is what we expect. And we had a week of really pushing that, and a few other meetings with senior leadership that kind of culminated on the Friday before we were due to open on the Monday, when the Director for Public Health and Sheffield City Council came out with a public statement saying that local authority schools would not open until at least the 15th, which obviously we thought, great, that's surely what Australia are going to do. And there was a very clear message to academies that they're expected to do the same thing. And then unfortunately we were dismayed when that afternoon we got a message from Australia saying that they were going to ignore the public health advice, which we sort of had to channel our fury at that point. And I spoke a lot with other NEU rep members who were more experienced about what we needed to do, and we decided we needed to make it very public and get it in the public eye what Australia were planning to do. So that weekend, there was a lot of contact with local papers. As part of the NEU, there was a bit of a Twitter storm on Sunday planned. So I asked some of my colleagues to get in contact with their friends to make sure that we actually included Australia in some of those tweets and made it clear to people what Australia were doing, and so that we could get our friends to do it rather than us, because then they're not colleagues of Australia. And that kind of public outcry over the weekend culminated in Australia reversing their decision on the Monday and saying that they would follow the public health advice and not open until at least the 15th. And one more thing, I would say that Twitter has been so valuable at being kept up to date with the science, following Independent Sage, following the NEU. I've managed to get the scientific information, share that with staff and share that with senior leadership teams, because I think at the moment, lots of people are not sure what to follow, but actually the science is pretty clear that it's unsafe. And if you can have a few things like the Independent Sage that show people, these are people you need to listen to, and these show that it's unsafe, you can't really argue with that science. So that's been super valuable. And we've had a few other concessions, such as agreeing to let staff members wear PPE if they feel like they need to, concessions on vulnerable staff members working from home, smaller class sizes and social distancing in school, and similar to what Zubia said earlier, getting the voices together has been the most important thing in getting those concessions, and it's really paid off. And we've had to stay strong, but it's been worth it. And we know that morally, as all of us on here we are in the right position. And I know that we are only saying these things because we care about the school community.
Thank you, Lee. And just, thank you to you again as well. And you go to prove that you don't actually have to be aggressive in negotiations. It's about knowledge, and it's about information, and it's about communication. And thank you so much for the brilliant work you are doing in very difficult times as well. I'm going to bring in the next rep here, who is Rachael, and she is from Telford NEU. Welcome, Rachael. Rachael's going to be talking about involvement and working with local authorities around wider opening. Hi, Rachel, welcome.
Hi, I just wanted to echo a few things that have been said really, and the power of it to start off with, in that actually get in contact with members and it not just being you, the person that's putting the argument forward. I'm very fortunate in the school that I work at. I actually sit on the SLT and I'm the only one that will be put forward to the rep. So actually my head teacher listens and, you know, we can really influence the plans that are being put in place. But members of staff that weren't members of a union still wanted to have their say, so we still needed to include those in the discussions and get their say, and actually they did join the union as a result of that. Locally, we've always had an issue with very little activism and actually getting reps out there in the schools. Now our regional staff have worked really hard to get more reps in schools, and it's been incredible. We've got a reps WhatsApp group where people have only just become reps like the week before they were due to be opening. They didn't know what they were doing, they didn't know where they stood, they'd got increasing pressures. So actually having a platform to be able to ask certain questions, share things, talk about it, because the letters that were being sent out, people were really reserved and didn't want to send the letters out. So it was about trying to say, but it might be okay in your school, but it's a wider voice. So that's kind of a local level. We've had real struggles. So when Tony contacted me and said, oh, well, we've got discussions with the local authority, you know, do you want to be part of it? And I was like, great. And it was actually really reassuring from our point of view, because they were going through all of the plans, they were putting proposed risk assessments in place, and we were able to say, well, but how is this actually going to be put forward into the classroom? How are you going to know that you've got this amazing risk assessment, that it actually looks like that in school? And I think that's where we're at now, really. But speaking from the local authority, they shared the risk assessment template with us before they issued it to the school. They scheduled an hour meeting with us. It lasted 2.5 hours. As we went through everything on the risk assessment and challenged it, and they listened to us, and they hadn't thought about some things, so they put that into the risk assessment, which was really powerful from our point of view. They agreed and gave the power to the schools to say, yeah, well, if you haven't got your pedal bins or whatever, you can't open your school because it's not, the risk assessment isn't complete. So that was a really strong voice, and we've had weekly meetings. And then, you know, we'd heard lots of different local authorities issuing their standpoint of whether they were going to open, whether they weren't. And we were saying, well, why haven't you issued a statement? 2 days later, we got a statement. So it's been really powerful to put that pressure on, but also to hear that they're drowning in the guidance from the government as well. And that actually they are putting those messages straight back to the government when they're having their conversations with the DFE. Another point that kind of sticks with me really, and I think many members will agree with this, in most cases, not all, it's not actually a battle against the head teacher. The head teachers want to work with us, and I think this has been said quite a lot throughout it all. And on our local authority meeting with the trade unions, the head teacher unions are there as well, and so many head teachers are at breaking point that actually it ties in with the rep feeling the pressure and not wanting to put the letter in because they know it's not the head teacher, but actually working with them and saying, we want to work with you, you know. So it's kind of been joint working really from the local authority point of view. And we've had successes with it. You know, some of the schools that were planning to open on the 1st aren't planning to planning to open now to the 15th. So there has been a huge delay in the reopening of the schools as a result of the WhatsApp group being set up, local authority meetings, etc. So we've been able to share everything from the local authority meeting straight out to our reps, often before the head teachers get the information, which is worrying, but also quite powerful. I think as well from the local authority point of view, when they put the risk assessment out, they made it clear that it was a baseline, and actually some schools wanted to take temperatures on entrance to school. They're not going to stop schools from doing that. You know, there's a school where parents had lied, a child was sent in, they'd given them Calpol in the morning, they developed a temperature, and they were told that they'd had a temperature for 3 days. You know, that's a justifiable reason to be able to take temperatures, and the local authority is saying we won't stop you from doing that. So yeah, I mean, increased members, getting the voices from everybody is the most important. But kind of the 2 points really is, if you're not in a WhatsApp group, join one, or speak to somebody from the staff that can get you on a group, because that's the most powerful. Yeah, you get bombarded some nights and need to mute it, but you've got information there, and sharing of information that you might have missed in the press or that you might have missed in an email, it's there kind of in your hand. And the other thing really, and I think that's the most poignant thing, is I know it's where we're at in our school now, the risk assessment's been signed off by the local authority. We've been in for a few days now, but are we actually reviewing what it looks like? And I think that's my role now, in actually reviewing it and making sure that we say, well, hang on a minute, that wasn't as tight as it should have been. What are we doing about it? And it's about people feeling empowered now to be able to say, no, I've got a right to be safe. Whereas they wouldn't have said that before, and head teachers feel empowered to be able to say, well, no, it's not safe, so we're not opening. So it is a success locally, and I think we've now got kind of the power behind us to be able to move forward. So there is a success that's come out of it, I think, if nothing else.
Thank you, Rachel. I think if nothing else is an understatement. You've done an amazing job, and getting a rep involved from school level into local authority is really good. You're getting a good insight. We are the second largest leadership union as well in the country. So absolutely, we have our leaders, and people should be working. And anyone who doesn't know, leaders have received over 300 pieces of document from the DFE since lockdown to try and get through in regards to this. So unity and working together is absolutely, you know, the union don't have to walk into your school building. So we are leaving it to you to have those conversations and to treat it as sensitively as you need to, but we are here to support you. I'm going to bring in our last rep now, but thank you very much, Rachel. Brilliant contribution. This new rep, brand new rep of 2 weeks, is Tom. And he's also from Redbridge, and he's talking about how do you establish a union group. You're not alone, Tom. There's over 2,000 of you. But how do you establish a union group and organise and make it work? Welcome, Tom.
So we started about 2 weeks ago. We didn't have a union, really, an active union, but we had over 50 members. And I've been teaching at the school 10 years, and I felt something we needed to have a union because this was such a big thing happening with the reopening of schools. And our school, for context, we've got a 5 form entry. We're over 1,000 children, which is quite scary because we're in London, we've got a large BAME population and lots of multi-generational households. And I think if we'd have opened our school at the wrong time, that could have been quite disastrous, not just for the school, but for the community and the people that live in the whole area. So I was sitting by and I was kind of getting more and more worried by the news. And I kind of thought, I've got to actually do something. So I decided to become a rep because we didn't have an active union. And that was, you know, quite a bit of a jump. It was worrying to see if everyone would get on board and support me with the members. But I was surprised, and I think, you know, people in our school voted with their feet, and I created a WhatsApp group and very quickly it got full. More and more people came, and that was really good for me to see, and it actually gave me a lot of relief. We had a Zoom call, which I was amazed at the amount of people that came again, and that really showed me that people were worried and they wanted in our school, they wanted it to be safe when they reopen. And we did a Zoom call, and in that Zoom call we had lots of chats and discussion, and got people to get their feelings across, because there was lots of things which I wasn't aware which they were worried about, and that was good to hear other people's opinions. Probably our best thing we did was we created a survey, and the survey allowed people to share how they feel. It was very similar to the NEU survey, but it was just specific for our school, and that gave us a mandate, but it allowed people to share how they feel and also share what their worries were. So we had it on paper, and we had these nice charts that we could present to our leadership team to say, look, 90% of our staff are worried about coming back to school. 60% feel it's very unsafe. And that allowed them to realise actually how the staff force felt. And I think doing it as a survey allowed them to have their chance to say, almost anonymously, without any comeback from maybe an SLT member if they feel they were criticising them. What was also interesting, we're a very large school, we've got over 50 members. We actually had quite a lot of people come forward to be reps. So we had 5 reps, which is great, you know, because it really shares the workload. But that also presents its challenges. We have to work together. But on the flip side, it allows us to spread out where we've got representatives in the school from different groups, and also allows different opinions to be come on. And for staff, when they want to talk to reps, they can talk to different people from different areas. So it's very much that no staff felt they didn't have someone they could talk to. In regards to what we achieved, we very quickly set a uni group up, and that was done almost over a weekend, and it was a very hectic weekend. There's a lot of work, but for me, I felt it was worth it because it was such an important cause, especially for our school not to be open on the 1st of June. Very quickly got it. We spoke with our head because the big aim for us is we didn't want to be a battle against our head. We wanted to work alongside our senior leadership team, because that isn't something any of us wanted to get ourselves in, especially as reps, because we wanted, to be a positive relationship with our leadership team, and that's something which, despite maybe the pressures or the barriers we get from our leadership team, we're still trying to maintain. We're still trying to keep that positive relationship rather than fall into a argumentative relationship between union and head teachers, because we do believe that that is a better approach for us. And it hasn't been easy. But yeah, we met our head teacher. We had a video chat, and then we produced a letter with all of everyone's worries, and that took a lot of debating in our WhatsApp group, and a lot of going back and forth. And in the end, we produced a letter, and as a result, partly from the union pressure across the borough and also the union pressure we did in school, our school opening got delayed till the 15th of June. And that was also one year group at a time rather than all 3 year groups, which was a big positive because doing the maths, we worked out on the 1st of June, we could have had over 300 people on site, which was quite scary for me to think about. Some of the takeaways I thought from this whole period is having a big group was difficult, but it's actually quite good because you get more opinions coming in. And we've had many members have said the union support has allowed them to get their working from home and being allowed to work from home where they wouldn't have been able to without that. And it shows also in an outstanding school and a happy school that union is still important. And it's important to be active. I don't think it's a good idea to have a union that's dormant. Similar to what was said earlier, I felt Twitter was a really good thing, but one of the things I really liked as well was getting ideas from other schools. So hearing what they did, and then presenting that to our school. So even like staggered timetables, or reduced timetables, so the children would have less time at school, would be less risk to the staff and children. So getting ideas from other schools I thought was really good. And, I follow different people in different schools, and that allows you to see what's happening in other schools, not just yours, in your borough as well. For me as well, I think as educators, we've got a role to keep the children safe. And, that's why it's important that myself and all the other reps who did tremendous work in our school, that they stood up and actually became reps. I think it's also really important that to work with your borough branch. And we were really lucky because we had a vendor who supported me and the other reps tremendously and gave us calls and would support us and check what we were sending, because we were very new in the role and we haven't had any training. So we were a bit still kind of unsure, what can we do? But with vendor, she provided us a lot of support. And then finally, for me, all the work we did, and there was lots of times when we'd be questioning how long we're working for, and it'd be our evenings we'd be using, but I think it was worth it because everything we do will prevent the virus from getting stronger and also weaken it, and therefore make it safer for us and our children. So that was my push to keep working hard. And we'll see where we keep going. We keep on trying to get concessions in different areas and making sure staff know that if they have a problem or they want support, there's a route to get that support now. But yeah, that's been our journey.
Tom, you are fantastic. And 2 weeks into the job, you sound like you've been doing it for a very long time compared to that. I think Tom's key points were know your reps, know your reps should know your members, know what your members are thinking, know what your members' concerns are, and build relationships. And if you don't know the answer, ask. And you've gone to your branch and district and asked those questions. So, absolutely amazing. I think this is probably the best reps call that we've ever done in the union. And I'm really proud to be your president and to hear all of the great stories, not just from you, but also on the chat. I've got some questions coming in. One of them that came in, and I'll let Mary and Kevin cover it, but I'm going to ask it first of all, is when we've made reference to black members, in the talk, we've used black member. Well, I'll just say we've used black members as a term in the union, but it does cover, the nationally recognised BAME members. So it covers all of those that are treated badly because of their race and are sometimes marginalised because of that. So that is what that covers. But if Mary and Kevin wanted to add anything further, I'm going to ask some questions to start with. and get through as many as we can. So Sharon from Walsall. In today's daily briefing, Boris Johnson has talked about the summer catch-up programme for schools. Do the NEU know anything about what Gavin Williams might announce? Mark from Hull. We've been asked to provide details of holidays that we have booked in the summer. In relation to the 14-day quarantine regulations when returning to the country, they're suggesting that we should be cancelling our holidays so we do not have to quarantine should members be cancelling their holidays. Sam in Oldham. What is the NEU's response to councils like Oldham, Stockport, Manchester, who are pressing ahead with opening despite the increased R numbers? And Lisa. I am getting backlash from management and other unions in regard to following through with union actions advice and health and safety training. What support can I get? I'll take those 4 to start. Come to you first.
So I'll do the first 2 and Kevin's going to do the last 2. So the summer catch-up programmes, does Gavin Williamson know what is going to be in those? Probably not. I don't think he probably does know. I think there'll probably be some work going on there. We don't think it should be catch-up. We think that that's the wrong emphasis. We think it should be, any summer programme should be about re-engaging children with each other, re-engaging their creativity, re-engaging their in society. And there's another question which has been asked about. I'm not got much time, so I just want to say, should you be under pressure to do this voluntarily? If you're being under pressure to do it, you're not doing it voluntarily. So no, if you've been working hard and you don't want to engage in summer clubs and summer activities, then you don't have to. The holiday booked, and should you cancel your holiday? No, you shouldn't. You need your holidays. I mean, I don't know where you're going. I'm very impressed if you are going on holiday. But if you're going on holiday and you chose to go in the last 2 weeks of the summer holidays, and therefore you need to take 2 weeks quarantine afterwards, then you need to take those 2 weeks quarantine. I mean, we don't know what the rules for quarantine will be like in a few weeks' time. But we've said before, there's plenty of work to be done from home. So no, you shouldn't be cancelling your holidays, and if you need to take quarantine, then you should work from home during that period. So those are my 2 answers. Kevin, got 2 more.
So I've got Sam's question about what the NEU thinks about councils like Oldham, Stockport and Manchester who are pressing ahead with opening despite the R number. And I think this is very important. It's not just the R number, it's also what the local case count is. And the case count is highest in the northwest and the northeast, with something like over 500 people per 100,000. You turn that around the other way, it's something like 1 in 150 people have got the virus. That means in an average school on partial opening, there will definitely be somebody with the virus in your school. We think the case count should be lower than that. So we're really pleased that Tameside Council has pushed back opening because the case count is so high. So that is our advice to those local authorities, is to push back that bit longer. And then Lisa's question, she's getting backlash from management and other unions in regards to following through with union actions, advice and health and safety training. What support can I get? I think it is really important. And the 4 fantastic reps that we had, Rachael, Zubia, Lee and Tom, fantastic. Thank you very much for your contributions. All of them in different ways talked about the need to have a school group. We want strong reps, but they have to be in touch with the school group. So I'm sure you are, Lisa, but the fact that other unions, you're saying that other unions aren't being supportive, I think it's worth checking in with your group so that they know, so that when you are speaking to the head, you know that you're speaking with the authority, with the voice of everyone else. If you want more advice, go to your branch secretary. They are there to talk with you about these sorts of things. They may have a WhatsApp group of reps where you could talk about these things in that sort of WhatsApp group as well. So I think check in with your union group and talk to your branch secretary.
Brilliant, you two. Thank you. I'm going to ask 2 more questions because I think we've got time to put in 2 more. What happens about, well, I'm going to be 3. What happens about the introduction of baseline this September and the Year 1 phonics test? Has the 10-point plan been created along with other unions, including head teacher unions? Unless we are unified across the profession, they will continue attack. That's from Nick, and the first one was from Yvonne. And SEN and SEND children are missing out greatly. No one really mentions this group. What are the NEU saying they would advise for these children who can struggle to learn out of school, but remote teaching does not always work for these children? And then finally, because I can answer this, I'm hearing a lot about drop-ins and full observations going on. What is our policy? No. Go on, you two.
So the baseline in year one, we keep being told that we're going to hear more about baseline in the near future, but we haven't been told yet what the plans for baseline are or for the phonics test. So we will update you as soon as we know. And the 10-point plan, that is, we have tried to work with one other union in the 10-point plan, but the 10-point plan is there. There's lots of people now in Parliament saying, both Conservative MPs, Labour MPs, commentators saying we need a national plan for education. Justin Greening, the ex Secretary of State for Education, the last before the one before this one, Justin Greening, Janie Hines, and then Gavin Williamson. She was talking yesterday on the radio about a national plan. So we're saying, okay, everyone's talking about a national plan, so let's do one. And we're going to write to the Prime Minister tomorrow, and we'll see what response we get, and then we'll try and work with other unions to make sure that happens.
So there's a question that I'd like to answer from Den about about our black members and what our advice is to them. And we've got advice out. There'll be more advice coming out hopefully tomorrow. We think it's really important to look at this question, and we've been pursuing government across it since the beginning of the pandemic. Eventually, when we threatened a judicial review over the fact that they weren't revealing information, they sent us something saying that schools should be sensitive to the needs of black people, and also saying they'd publish more information. Now, sensitive is nothing like a good enough word from our point of view, but it does mean if a head teacher is saying, I don't have to do anything about black people, the fact that the government says, no, you have to be sensitive, that means something has to happen. We think it's important to say this is collective around all the questions of vulnerable people who we think shouldn't be in, and we think there's only 23% of vulnerable people, maybe another 3 or 4% of black people, another 1% of teachers over 60. We think this is all doable and it needs to be collective. We'll have more advice out tomorrow. We want reps to take this up. We're now starting to say that anyone over 60, we can see the increased risks. We think it's better at this moment if they're working from home. And I think we're going to be saying with black people, that should be 55. Looking at the way the risks work, black people roughly twice the risk of somebody their age. But when you look at it, that's roughly the same risk as somebody 5 or 6 years older who is white. So we think that we do want to press on that. We'll be getting more advice out about it. It really matters. The question also asks about advice to black parents. And this is something that we want to press government on and press them more, because they'll end up saying something like, you have to make your own assessment about the risks. But they need to give head teachers more than that. If you're looking at a Bengali family where the government says the risks are twice, and if you've got a multi-generational family, which many Bengali families are, and that means you've got a grandparent at an age even greater than 60, the risk if that person catches it is quite severe. Now, the question of what the chances of them catching it, that depends on the level of the virus, but we want government to give head teachers better things to talk about with parents than that. But we are going to have to be the sensitive to, in that word, there will be black children who are staying at home for that reason. And we have to ensure that they are being educated when they're at home. The government has to give them laptops and broadband, and all of that has to be done urgently, not just for black people, but for all the children who don't have that stuff at home. And I just think it's important to say that we know that this extra risk that black people are at is not because of biology. It's because black people are generally in the more disadvantaged parts of the population, and because of structural racism. Black people often get in the worst shifts, or those sorts of questions. So we think that's a vital thing for us to keep pressing on.
And can I just quickly do about the SEM pupils?
Please.
So we have thought about SEM pupils. If you go to our website, we've got a microsite for parents. We've got creative activities there which can be done by children of all abilities and that with special needs, where there's a whole range of work there. So it is more difficult in these times for many children with SEND, but the NEU has not forgotten them. And I think that's just important to reiterate. We have not forgotten and not stopped thinking about pupils and children and young people with SEND.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Mary and Kevin, and to all our panellists. And a huge thank you to Sam, our signer, and our tech team, who you don't see, but who do a cracking job to field all of the questions from over 1,000 of you that have been on this call this evening. Any questions that weren't answered, we look at. The tech team pass through to the various committees or offices in the union to look at and to form. This is where we form things like our 10-point plan. We are a union that listens to members. I want to start by saying that over the last few weeks, or finish by saying, it's been mentioned in negative forms, even just today and yesterday by the government, in the press and by some MPs. But actually, when you're a teacher and you have 29 parents in and they all say great things and you have one that says a bad thing, that's what you think about. And we can't think about that because there are parents out there that are really supportive. There are leaders out there that are supportive. There are academy chains that are supportive. There are local authorities that are supportive. And you all should be really, really proud that you have contributed to that saying that I think will come back, save lives and protected the NHS. The NEU has done that, and you are the NEU. When we were first formed, the National Education Union were deemed the super union in size. We are actually the super union as well in quality, and that is because of our union. I always say the union is made up of the family you should choose to join. And for you, I want to ask you to please keep filling in those risk assessment and checklists. Please work with other unions, because unity, you've heard from all of our reps today, is absolutely strength. Please share this job. Do not ever feel alone and feel you have to answer every question. Look on the back of your membership card to answer your branch and district. Go to the website and be honest and say, I don't know that answer, but I will come back and find it out for you. We hope that this is helpful. We hope that the advice is helpful. And we have members across the union, from leadership to teaching assistants to NQTs. And we want to make sure that every single one of those is informed, and you are the people that are doing that. So thank you so much for joining us, and thank you for coming so late in the day when I know many of you would have been in school or been working and planning lessons today. So thank you very much. And